Hello and welcome to another Groipcast. Today is a special night because we have a special debate for all of you watching. Tonight we're going to have a debate on is mass legal immigration good for America? Today we will have Zoomer Nat be our moderator, and our two contenders are Garrett and Patrick Casey. And so Zoomer Nat will introduce them and we'll go from there.
Thank you guys for tuning in. It's going to be a big night. There's been a lot of build up to this. If anyone's not aware, Garrett here previously made a video on YouTube pretty much criticizing Nick Fuentes on wanting to destroy the West. He's also said that immigration is a good thing, mass immigration is a good thing, and there aren't really much downsides. And on the other side, we have Patrick Casey, the founder and president of AIM, as they're probably all familiar with him. We had him on a couple weeks ago. Great time. Garrett, how are you?
Pretty good, man. How are you doing?
Good. Patrick, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Glad to be here.
Awesome. So, without any further delay, I'm going to let you guys each give basically a 2-minute intro on who you are and what your general stance on mass immigration is. So, Garrett, do you want to start off?
Sure. I am a YouTuber who started making YouTube videos daily about sometime in September or October. Started making daily YouTube videos, 3:30 every day. Like to talk about largely philosophical issues. Sometimes I get into politics, which is where you guys probably know me from. One of the big things that I'm focusing on, especially lately, is how to find meaning. Essentially, it's how we fill this void of meaning that is largely taking place in the West, without mysticism, without resorting to the cult of Christ, as a lot of people in the objective sphere like to call it. But
Tips fedora, but continue. Yes.
Oh man. So did you want me to give my immigration position, or do you want to introduce yourself first?
No, go for it. Let's hear it.
All right, for sure. So my basic position on immigration is basically the idea that anybody can come into the country if they can make it to the border and basically pass a check for a criminal background and diseases. If they can pass both of those tests, basically they can get let in the country. I'm not a big fan of like shipping over a bunch of refugees, because that's a waste of our money, and we see how that's turned out in Europe with shipping in a bunch of refugees with with government money. And basically, in a country with my system of immigration, I would be in favor of basically deporting anyone who is an illegal immigrant, because if they are coming over the border when it's illegally, when it's this easy to just come, check for your criminal background, and basically check to see if you have any diseases, why would you be coming over the border otherwise? You probably have some disease, or you're probably have some sort of criminal background. But yeah, I think that is for justification for it, is basically the idea of freedom of association. If you are an individual in this country and want to hire an immigrant worker, if you're a business owner, want to hire an immigrant worker, I see no problem with that. Or if you're someone who wants to sell a house to an immigrant worker, if they come in, I have no problem with that. You can associate with whomever you want. If you want them on your land, that's perfectly fine with me. I just don't see any reason for the government to get involved in that situation. So yeah, that's basically my stance. So you go ahead when you're ready.
All right. Well, as Zoomer Nat introduced me, I'm Patrick Casey, president of American Identity Movement. I've been involved in dissident politics for close to 5 years at this point. Probably closer to 4, but 5 is a better number to say that you're close to. I've done a bunch of activism. I've done appearances on the mainstream media, podcasts, videos, the whole thing. So without getting too far into what I've done, my position on immigration basically is that immigration, as it is currently being done in America, both legal and illegal, is a bad thing. It is detrimental to America. It more broadly is an issue that the West at large is grappling with. And so at this point, I support significant reductions in legal and illegal immigration, with the kind of the best case scenario, at least for at least indefinitely, would be an immigration moratorium. So that's about the categorical opposite of what Garrett here proposes. So there should be an interesting discussion.
Yeah, it should be fun.
But yeah, Garrett. So I want to ask you, why you seem to think that the only standards that we should be looking for is if someone is diseased, and if someone a prospective immigrant isn't a criminal, isn't a rapist. And that's good that puts you a little bit above the left. You're fine with people, you don't want diseased rapists and pedophiles coming into the country. However, it seems that if you want, does the question of quality ever cross your mind when it comes to the people that we're letting in? It seems to me that you're just, as long as they meet like extremely low standards, that you're okay with letting them in. So I mean, do you care about quality at all when it comes to immigration?
Well, so as long as they're not violating anyone's rights in this country, that is the purpose of government. The purpose of government is to protect individual rights. This is what has made the country great, largely.
Debatable, but okay. That's your conception of
but,
government. Yeah.
But if because as a human individual should have the right to think for themselves, act for themselves, keep the results of their action. And I don't see any reason why focusing on like quality of immigrants or anything like that is too important in regards. I think if they're violating rights by bringing in some diseases, or they're criminals and they're going to violate somebody's rights, then we stop it. But if they're not violating anyone's rights, there is no real negative impact of letting different people
in. No real negative impact. No.
Yeah.
What if we let in a lot of stupid people? Do you think that would maybe have a negative effect on the country? What if we let in tens of millions of really dumb, like low IQ people every year? Do you think that maybe, just society wouldn't run as well because everyone's a retard?
Well, oh God. We would largely have a lot of job openings for lower skilled people. Like, for example, let me look at this study over here. The construction industry has the highest share of owners reporting hiring difficulties at 68%. The manufacturing was second at 59%. And we need more workers in this country. And if there's someone who's a low skilled, which is a word I prefer to retarded to refer to these people, but to each their own, I guess. If you want to let in whatever low skilled immigrants you want to, this is going to be better for the economy.
Sure. And to be fair, I mean, there is a difference between someone being so low IQ that they could, that they're close to being actually retarded, and someone who's, maybe of middling intelligence and just doesn't, have any skills. Right. So I see what you're getting at there. I'll say this. It's a good thing that there's a shortage of workers, right? At a certain point, it becomes an issue. But, the horrifying thing, I think, to libertarians and to conservatives and neoliberals at this point is that American, companies are forced to pay their employees more. They're forced to pay American workers more. You see all these articles come out lamenting the fact that American companies and business owners are forced to pay their employees more. But, as a nationalist, that's a good thing. We don't want people living in poverty. We want American workers to be paid well. That's kind of how it used to be. So yeah, I get where you're coming from. I think, what's your response to that? Do you care at all about, how American workers are doing, or
there's
flood the country with cheap labor and just
there's very little correlation between native wages and immigrants coming in or between low skilled immigrants coming in and native wages. There's very little correlation with that. I mean, I can.
No, there is. It's basic supply and demand.
Explain it to me. I'd like to hear this.
Sure. So the more of something you have, the less value there is, right?
Sure, but when you have,
these articles that have come out are not written by people who are pro-Trump by any means, right? These are articles in the New York Times, the Washington Post, talking about how because there are fewer workers, those workers, companies are forced to pay them more. It's basic supply and demand, and that's why big corporations and the neoliberal globalist establishment overall, it's one of the reasons, at the very least, why the establishment wants to bring in these people. That's at the very least why the GOP wants to bring in cheap foreign labor, because they understand that it's going to depress wages. So it is bad for workers. It's absolutely bad for workers. And this is basic economics, supply and demand.
Okay, I'm going to make 2 points here. But the first one is largely the fact that you're missing an important aspect here when it comes to labor and these sort of things. Because when immigrants come in, they buy more things. They produce more demand for goods, basically, which means that the demand for labor will also go up. So as the supply goes up and the demand goes up, the wages will largely be ineffective. And that's what most studies that I've seen have bared out from my research
for some time. Yeah,
I mean, we could. That's a whole other topic we can get into, but that's not really necessarily related to immigration.
So okay, just so we can we can wrap up on this note, or we can keep talking about it. But I just want to be clear so that I understand your.
Can I make my last point? And
sure.
even if immigrants lower wages, I mean, it does hurt those few American workers, but largely as a whole, it's going to lower prices for the rest of us, which basically offsets for those lower wages, and it basically lowers prices for the rest of us, which makes us better off economically.
Yeah, I understand that argument. It'll lower the prices of some goods maybe, but just so I understand your position here, you're disputing the fact that as a result of the labor shortage that's kind of come about thanks to Trump, you're disputing the fact that that has forced companies to pay higher wages.
I'm not sure
because that's easily that's. I mean, I don't have the studies in front of me now, but that's. I would like to pinpoint some demonstrable, some falsifiable claims so that we can both come away from this learning something. So if that's one of your claims,
I disagree that it's a good thing to have. Even if that's true, I disagree that it's a good thing for
what American wages rising. That's a bad thing.
No, because
workers are able to get by and scraping by for $8 an hour. That's a bad thing.
Just for clarity, if I might jump in for a second.
Sure.
So I have a study from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and it says here that after more than a decade of lagging the broader economy, wages in low-wage industries, those that tend to rely on low-skilled workers such as retail, food service, and nursing homes, are now rising at 4.5% a year. This is higher than previous years, and it coincides with the decrease in net immigration under the Trump administration. So just to clear that up.
Yeah, do you have anything that looks at that with regards to price change and different things related to that?
I do not have price change. I'm just talking about low-skilled wages are rising high.
If immigrants basically lower prices for goods, that largely makes this higher wage or lower wages not as important. But largely, it doesn't.
You're saying that because they grow it's the argument that they grow GDP, and as a result of that,
I don't care about GDP. I'm talking about
sure.
prices of goods and production and innovation.
Well, so your position, if I'm clear, your position is so long as consumer prices are low, then the low-skilled wages don't matter. You'd prioritize the cost of goods over earnings of people in low-skilled industries.
Possibly, but I don't think anyone's entitled to a certain wage either. If an employer wants to give someone a certain wage, that's what they're entitled to do. I mean, it's their freedom to give people the wages because they are the people that are providing the job. They're the people that are producing the things. Like these jobs don't exist if you don't have an employer providing those jobs. So if a lower wage employee wants to agree to that wage, it's up to them. They choose it, and it's a win-win trade.
Well, what if there's like kind of no other option, right? What if we consider a scenario in which like the minimum wage is $2 and that's like the only option for a lot of people. I mean, you don't think there should be any minimum wage at all? You think that employers being forced to pay $7 an hour to American workers is some kind of travesty or what?
I mean, from my experience, a lot of employers pay higher than minimum wage anyway. So, I mean, it's basically like what do you think is going to be in your best interest? What do you think as a worker is going to be in your best interest? And you look for the job like that because we actually have a large shortage of jobs in this country, or a lot shortage of jobs, shortage of workers. Basically, we have a big shortage of workers in this country, and there's a lot of jobs available to these people. Sometimes they might have to move to a different state, move to a different region, but that's on them. It's not on the government to force.
Yeah, and because of that shortage, right? Workers are getting paid more, and again, maybe you don't see that as a good thing. It's okay. So maybe we can move on a little bit here. I mean, we can keep discussing this, but we do want to keep in mind. I think when you do these debates, it's really easy to fall down rabbit holes on just one issue, and there's a lot to discuss. So I wanted to ask you about immigration, and do you seem to believe you seem to place a lot of emphasis on liberalism, right? Classical liberal Enlightenment era ideals. That seems to be kind of where objectivism, which is what you've described yourself as, comes from. My question to you is, how do you think that you can maintain a society that reflects liberal ideals, liberal values like individualism, laissez-faire economics, limited government, so on and so forth, First Amendment, Second Amendment, assuming you care about those, how do you think you can preserve a country like that when you're basically demographically replace the people who created those values with people from alien cultures that don't have those values, that never created them, never adopted them? I mean, because it seems to me that if you replace the people who created a certain way of viewing the world and maintain that way of viewing the world, then you're just going to get something else, and it's not going to be that particular ideology.
I mean, immigrants largely assimilate to the culture over time.
What does that mean, though? What does that mean?
They basically do what we tell them to do when they come into the country. Now we're telling them this is a problem with the country. Actually, right now,
I mean, you got a big issue with lots of them who are coming in, illegally, hopping the fence, overstaying visas. So they're kind of not really telling. At least a good portion of them are not doing what we tell them to do.
I'm talking about the intellectual, basically, assimilation. The ideas that are advocated by most intellectuals in this in the intellectual realm are not pro-reason. They're not pro-freedom. They're not pro-individualism. This is not what we're advocating for these people to believe. And largely, historically, immigrants have assimilated. Look at the Irish. Look at the Italians. Look at everybody historically.
Western European immigrants.
They weren't considered what they
the Middle East.
They were considered different peoples back then.
No one ever disputed that Ireland and Italy were not part of Western civilization. We're not part.
That was actually very disputed back then. I mean,
you're seriously going to make the argument?
You're seriously
going to make the argument that people didn't think that Ireland and Italy and Poland were in Europe, dude? Everyone's always known that those countries are in Europe. Everyone's always considered those countries part of Western civilization. Italy is where you have like Rome and all classical antiquity and so forth.
Sure,
no one ever believed that was anything else than Western civilization.
There was this large nativist sentiment back then as those immigrants were coming in at the same time about these same sort of things, that they're going to change their culture, that they're different people, that they're dirty people. I'm not disputing that they're from Europe. I'm disputing the fact that these are the same exact arguments that are used against Mexicans today and all these sort of people today coming in. It's the same sort of sentiment.
Right. So going back to 19th century immigration, again, so you had your mass immigration from Europe that came in and caused a lot of problems too, right? There was a lot of ethnic tension. You had people concerned about the shift in demographics and so forth. So I mean, that did cause some chaos, right?
What's the chaos? Tell me what the chaos is that immigrants are
causing. You're just describing. Social unrest. You had the nativist sentiment. Okay, you didn't describe it that way.
I thought you were talking about like conflicts between the two, and that's not what I'm talking about.
I mean, there was some degree of social conflict, right? There was a sense among WASPs that their country was being demographically overrun. And that's why we got the 1921 Immigration Act, right? Because they said, okay, that's good. We're going to cap our demographics. America has always been a demographically conscious country. It's always been, or at least has been, somewhat of an identitarian country since the beginning.
But why do demographics matter?
Well, if I might jump in for a second, just to go back to the original topic of changing policies. I was wondering if you guys could offer your thoughts on this. So Garrett, you just asked, why do demographics matter? Now, do you value the First and Second Amendment?
Sure.
So
I value individual rights above that, but
sure, individual rights, yeah. So numerous studies, I have one pulled up right now by Pew, and it's on hate speech. And in every single one of these studies, non-Hispanic whites favor absolute free speech over a law that would make certain hate speech illegal. So in this one right here, 47% of Latinos, 41% of African Americans, and 26% of whites would favor a law making it illegal to say offensive things based on race in public. There are other ones that have higher percentages. So what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, Latinos also have really socially conservative values, which you guys are big fans of. They're very much like, if you look at, for example, a big talking point you guys like is the fall of the family in the West. I mean, they have a lot more cohesive families in other countries besides the West.
Okay, but to the point we're discussing on individual rights, I'm just wondering what your argument would be to kind of reconcile for these demographic differences that persist through generations.
I see no reason to basically say that the government needs to enforce certain beliefs, and free speech isn't even like an essential right. It's more like it derives from life.
I'd say it's pretty essential.
It comes from life, liberty, and property. It's those essential rights.
Not essential though. So immigrants come in and they don't support the First Amendment. Next thing you know, conversations like this are deemed, hate speech, and it's not that.
Are immigrants actually changing anything though with regards to policy?
Mass immigration is undeniably altering and reshaping our political institutions. If you don't get that by now, then I don't know what to tell you, man.
How is it doing so?
Because you're bringing in people who disproportionately vote for the Democratic Party. Do you know what percentage Asians and Hispanics vote for the Democratic Party?
No, but I'm not too interested.
No, you don't. You don't.
I'm not too interested in the Democrats versus the Republicans. I don't find any.
Okay, but if you value individual rights, then the party that's trying to build bigger government and tax the hell out of you and so forth, you think you'd be against that, wouldn't you?
I'm also against them restricting the Republicans is restricting a lot of things like bans on porn, bans on.
Oh, there you go. You got your priorities straight there.
No, I'm not personally.
You're not a coomer, are you?
I am not.
Okay.
But I don't think
you want to have access to porn.
I don't think the government has the right to ban that sort of thing. Things like banning marijuana and all these sort of different things that conservatives are very interested in banning, and also with the immigration, taking away people's right to freely associate with whatever immigrants they want to.
Right. So so you don't care about Democrat versus Republican, but again, Second Amendment, First Amendment, limited government, low taxes, are these things that you care about?
Sure, I'm interested in those things too. But
interested in those things too. I mean, when I start talking about what you actually care about, you're kind of putting out like these vague terms. It's when I try to get you on a specific policy, you kind of seem like you're weaseling around here, because I think you understand if you point to a specific policy that you really care about, it's kind of, look, dude, the people from the third world, they don't care about any of this. They don't care about objectivism. They don't care about liberalism. They don't care about limited government. They don't care about
most people don't care about politics in general in the West too. So, I mean, they'll largely assimilate. They're coming to be part of a capitalist society. They're leaving behind these very authoritarian societies.
And they're hopping on the dole, and they're voting for a party that is veering towards socialism. So that absolutely disproves this talking point that you had. See, you and other people we
can talk about the fiscal impact of
perspective, all of this, you just totally misunderstand the people that we're bringing in, right? You totally misunderstand what these people actually believe, and you entertain these myths that these people are just like us. These people are reading Ayn Rand as they're coming across the border. It's just an absolute load of nonsense. It's just not the case at all. And any type of society that's going to be based on liberalism and classical liberalism and Enlightenment era values is going to have to be predominantly white, predominantly European. Why is that? Because we're the only people that really care about that stuff.
Okay, but immigrants are coming to this country to assimilate to the country. They see these values in America.
They're coming here to gain. No, they're not. They're not. You seriously think these immigrants are coming here because they're reading like they're reading John Locke or something? They're like, I love small government. No, they're not. They're coming here for economic opportunity. They're coming here to advance their individual and group interests. And if you think it's anything different than that, then you're really just not paying attention to what's happening. These people absolutely do not care about the stuff that you are accusing them of caring about. This is an issue I see among conservatives, libertarians. You are projecting your views onto people who are coming in, and you're totally not seeing the situation as it really is.
I'm not doing any of that. I'm saying that these people
you absolutely are.
I'm saying these people are coming to this country because they see it's a free country, and they see that these they basically see economic opportunity here, which is what a point that you said, to pursue their individual happiness, and they see. Can I?
Sure.
Go ahead and make your.
Okay,
point.
So
go ahead and make your point.
These people are seeing a free capitalist country, and they're coming to leave behind these authoritarian countries. That's basic, and they come and they assimilate. They largely do. They do what we tell them to do. If we tell them keep your own culture, don't assimilate to Western culture, don't accept Western values, that's what we do. And we don't even believe in Western values here in the West anymore. We've completely abandoned reason. We've completely abandoned individualism. All of the intellectuals in the current culture have abandoned all of that stuff. And you guys aren't any better. You guys don't believe in individualism.
Yes, we've totally abandoned reason. We've just totally devolved to atavistic superstition. You're absolutely right.
I mean, you guys are Christians.
I haven't. What? Okay, first of all, I'm not really a Christian. I defend Christianity. That's a totally fedora argument. And by the way, it doesn't even apply to me. So nice try. Let's go back to what you said about immigrants wanting to flee from authoritarianism, come to a capitalist liberal society. Again, if that was really the case, they would come here and they would vote for the party of capitalism. But instead, they come here and vote for the party of big government, of welfare. Immigrants use welfare at disproportionately higher rates, far higher rates than natives, even among, the same ethnic group, right? So it's very clear that these people are not coming here for ideological reasons. They're not coming here because they like John Locke and they read the Constitution and they think it's a brilliant document. They're coming here because of the gives. They're coming here because they understand that they get free stuff if they come here. They understand if they come here and they have kids, right? It's just a better economic opportunity. You're absolutely right. But guess what? These people vote for welfare. These people go on welfare. These people do not give a damn about capitalism. You are right in some extent that they're coming here to reap the rewards of a capitalistic society. But if you keep maintaining mass immigration from the third world solely based on the voting patterns of these people, you're not going to have a capitalistic society for that much longer.
So then ban welfare. Don't let these immigrants get on welfare. I'd be fine with not letting a immigrant become a citizen for until their second generation. I'd be fine with not letting first generation immigrants become citizens and get on welfare and vote and all these sort of things.
Second generation immigrants are in some ways worse than first generation immigrants, though. This idea that once you come here and
that's our fault that's our fault as a country for our shitty education and our complete abandonment of Western ideals.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of people do fine in school. I think it more has to do with bad students than bad schools. That's kind of like a Democrat argument there. We need more money for the academic programs to keep.
No, I don't believe in that. I believe in privatizing education. I think privatizing education would make it a lot better, so that you don't have this one size fits all sort of standard that we have now that completely ruins education for everybody.
Yeah, maybe separate issue, but. It's where are these Enlightenment values found in the rest of the world? Like what other country has, because that's the thing with liberalism. Liberalism understands itself, I would say inaccurately, as based in universal human reason. And you were throwing around the word reason too, so you might be kind of part of this. The idea that if you just consult reason, right, universal human reason, you will arrive at liberal conclusions. And so that kind of leads to, an erroneous understanding of the way things work, right? That's why people think that, our views, our liberal views are based on universal human reason. They're therefore universal in nature. And as a result, it's just a matter of time until everyone sees things the right way. And so you seem to think that these people are coming here because they see, again, just this, it's almost like you're like a supremacist for liberalism. You think that these views are just so like they're self-evident, right? And as a result of that, it's just, you just bring these people here, they'll assimilate, they'll do what we tell them to do. It just isn't the case.
They do what we tell them to do. They do exactly what we tell them to do. Because all the intellectuals promote multiculturalism, which is this idea that we should all treat all the cultures the same. Don't just keep your culture when you come in. That's what we tell immigrants when they come in. Keep your culture. Don't abandon. Your culture is just as good as ours. But we should let these immigrants basically assimilate. We should tell them, no, American culture is the best culture. Individualism is the best way forward, and you should adopt these values if you want to come to America.
So that's actually happening less these days. You see minorities are starting to be more and more tribal. And if you understand the reality of identity,
I agree with that. I agree. They're becoming more and more tribal because of what we push.
But you still want to keep bringing them in.
Yeah, because this is our fault. It's not their fault. We should. No, I'm saying
it's our fault for letting them in. Yes.
No. Oh my God. We need to basically tell these people different things. We need to tell them to assimilate, in a sense.
But just assimilate, immigrants, assimilate. What does it mean? What do you ask?
How would each of you guys tackle the assimilation issue? Garrett, what would your solution hypothetically be?
We need to intellectually believe in reason. We need to intellectually believe in individualism. We need to hold those as actual values in American culture. And when immigrants come, they assimilate to the culture that they come to. This has always been true historically, and it's even true today. The issue is not with these immigrants. It's at home with our intellectuals.
Patrick, what do you think of that?
Yeah, I think that it's kind of a pipe dream too, and we're just blaming the current state of America. Maybe if we had Randians, disciples of objectivists in all of the universities and so forth, things would be different. I just don't think that's the case. I'll just say this: the Western civilization overall is a product of a specific people, right? And that is the European people.
Why is that the case? Why does that have to be the case?
White people, because you can't look at what has been created by people without understanding that it is the product
You look at the
of a
ideas.
specific
Everybody
people.
can adopt these ideas and come up with them and create flourishing
And
societies.
yet they
Look
don't.
at the
And yet they
Islamic
don't.
Golden
Where
Age,
have
though.
they done that? Look at Liberia. We built Liberia had a constitution that was very similar to ours. And how's Liberia doing these days? It's
I
not
don't know
doing
shit
too
about
well.
Liberia. I'm talking about if we look at
Well,
the Middle East during the Islamic
that
Golden Age,
anyone
that's
can
when they
adopt these
accepted
ideas.
Aristotle.
Well, they tried. It didn't work.
I mean, the Middle East adopted Aristotle largely during the Islamic Golden Age when they created this great prospering civilization that
Okay,
created a lot of
that
math.
is just absolutely historically inaccurate. The
Oh
idea that there
God.
was the Islamic Golden Age, all of these achievements that Islam purportedly did during the Golden Age were done by dhimmis. Do you know what a dhimmi is?
No idea.
Okay, so a dhimmi is a non-Islamic person who's living in the Islamic world. The only thing Islam ever brought was the sword. Islam was good at conquering. It was good at getting desert people really mad to go kill people over there. And as a result, they conquered superior civilizations just through brute force. They did that to Persia, right? They did that in Spain. They did that in other parts of the world. And what they ended up doing is enslaving the people there, forcing non-Muslims. There was a different kind of set of laws that applied to them. These were the people that created, the golden age, right? It was not Muslims doing this stuff.
I mean, then
The
why did it happen
Islamic
in the-
world did
why did it-
preserve some classical texts. We can give them that. But saying that they adopted Aristotle isn't an ideology. Aristotle is a thinker who discussed
his
a number
ideology
of
reason focused on individual reason and the ability of human beings to think for themselves and produce things.
right. Well, everyone thinks that they think for themselves, regardless of any ideology, right?
I mean,
So
you
just
don't seem
saying,
to. You don't seem to think that people of different colors can think for themselves. So
no, I think that people of different colors, in some senses, actually are more intelligent than white people like you, who have are totally deracinated and have no understanding of identity. These people understand that they have group interests.
matter.
You just see yourself as an atomized individual floating through space, no tribe, and that's just not the way the world works. You're
That's
part of a
technically-
group,
that's
like
all
it or
that
not. You are
matters.
going to be treated as part of a group, like it or not.
A
And
group's a
non-whites
collection of
understand that.
individuals.
That's why when they come here, they form ethnic blocks, right? They come here and they advocate for their ethnic interests. They're not becoming individualists. They're not
Because
coming
that's what we
here
tell
because
them to
they
do.
like individualism. They are coming here to advocate for their group interests and to seek personal and group benefits. So the idea, by the way, a lot of these I always hear this from people like you, objectivists, classical liberals, libertarians, always talking about how it's about individualism and you have to think for yourself. And if you don't do that, then you're just totally superstitious and primitive and whatever else. I'm not accusing you of directly saying that. But the idea that classical liberalism and individualism, which is where the kind of current iteration of individualism you're discussing comes from, is the idea that that's incompatible with a sense of group identity is just silly. It's just nonsense, right? America was founded explicitly to be a white country. So while at the same time it did, guarantee.
Why do you say it was founded explicitly as a white country? There's no connection between. There's no real connection between white people and having to
Are you
accept
familiar
a
with our
certain
first
ideology.
Naturalization Act? Are you familiar with our first Naturalization Act?
No.
Okay. That's the Naturalization Act of 1790. Do you know what it says in there? It says that citizenship in America is going to be limited to white people of good moral character. That is explicit. It is in our literally.
We
so
also
the founding
enslaved
fathers.
black people back then, so there's
Black people weren't citizens. They weren't citizens. They were not citizens. Yeah,
they were
right. When we're
slaves.
talking about who could be a citizen in the country, they were talking about white people. And that's, again, you guys have this understanding of history that is just so far gone from the reality of how it really was. It is absolutely perfectly reasonable to have a sense of group identity, right? Identitarianism, and at the same time have a society that guarantees to some degree individual rights. And guess what? That's what America is. And that's what it was understood to be up until very recently. In most of our immigration laws, again, I said earlier that America has always been a demographically conscious country, and it has been. Even a little, Catholic immigration was like a little too much for the WASPs. Now, whether or not that was a good or a bad thing, that's a whole different debate. When it comes to, let's go to 1965. So the 1965 Immigration Act. Are you familiar with that one?
Yeah, I am. I know a little bit about that one.
What do you know about that?
That Congress basically passed it, and that a lot of people like you like to claim that it was completely against the will of the people and it was like a big conspiracy. So,
Okay, so you you don't really understand much about it.
I just know your guys' claims about it.
Yeah, you know that it passed, and then you know that people like me have a conspiracy theory about it. I guess that's, you know, look at the Wikipedia page. That's probably the entire entry, huh? So I'll tell you this: Ted Kennedy got up there and basically, in a famous speech, told Americans that this immigration law would, you know, this Immigration Act, Hart-Celler, 1965, would not alter our country's racial and ethnic demographics. So to even get this thing through, to even not have people rioting in the streets or whatever else they feared, probably re-election in the case of these politicians, they had to tell people, we're not going to upset the racial demographics of this country. And, you know, back in the 1960s, it was like 88, 90% white. Right. So that's very recent that there was a large understanding, a large, you know, conception of America as an outgrowth of Western civilization and as a country that, though not exclusively limited to whites, was majority for people of European heritage. I mean, do you accept that America is something that was understood to be created by white people for white people for the longest period of time?
Look,
or?
I don't care about the will of these people back in the day. Like these.
I mean, you're talking about
I don't care about the
values. You're saying that
racial.
we're
I don't
against
care about
Western
the.
American
I don't
values
care about
we have
the
a sense of
racial
group
attitudes
identity.
of these people back then. I care about the principles that America was founded on, which was individualism.
Yeah, but it's very clear that the individualism that you think the founders, you know, were talking about is different than what they were actually talking about.
What is the individualism they were talking about?
Because of what I just said, they were identitarians. They explicitly created this country for white people. So again, the kind of individualism that they were talking about, right?
Where is that? Why is that not in the Constitution? If you're claiming that it was entirely created for white people.
They took it for granted. The idea that there were going to be mass immigration.
So there's no mention of it anywhere in the Constitution in our founding document.
Well, when it came time a few years,
nowhere in the Declaration of Independence either.
Years later to decide who could come in and did it. Just look at quotes of almost any founding father, what they thought about race. Do you seriously think that these people like had the same views as you on individualism, on race? These people owned slaves, dude. These people literally owned other people because they weren't white, right? That is far more extreme than anything that I believe racially. And you're saying that these people, oh yeah, actually they don't believe what I believe in, right?
You don't have to look much further than the Declaration of Independence to see that what people believe, that all men are created equal, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. These are all rights that are guaranteed to all men. I don't see any.
All men. They did not intend that to be all men. They were talking about white people. And again, it's reflected in the society that they built. Why would they say that and not apply it to blacks? Why would they say that when they have slavery? And that's because they didn't
because they were not being consistent. They weren't consistently following their principles at that point in time.
No, it's because they clearly didn't apply that. They applied that stuff to white men. The society was geared toward white men. But what you're saying is, you can go back. People like you, liberals, can go back and reinterpret what they said along, contemporary liberal, progressive, whatever lines. And that's just not the case. If you want to understand, you want to just cherry pick these little phrases and interpret them to mean something else. And when I try to give you the historical context of what we're actually talking about, then you're like, oh no, don't bring it up. They didn't. No, it's reflected in the society that they built. It's reflected in the first immigration law that we have. These people are identitarians. It's that simple. And if you don't care about that, I could bring up quotes from individuals, founding fathers, right? We can go into that. We can go into how most abolitionists wanted to send blacks back to Africa. You have Abraham Lincoln, who even talked about that for a while, right? They were, I think, talking about sending them to Liberia, to Panama, somewhere. So the idea that this country that identitarianism is incompatible with this country is patently false. And in fact, the opposite is the case.
I'm talking about the larger trends of the time. You can point out all these little specific things that America might have made a mistake on, or where they didn't consistently apply the principles that they were founded on, like individualism. And that's basically all you're pointing out.
Those principles.
How am I misinterpreting those principles? It literally says in the Constitution, it's based on, or not the Constitution, Declaration of Independence, which is basically the spirit of what makes America great, is that all men are created equal and Lockean property rights. The idea that, and this all
John
comes
Locke
from,
supported slavery, by the way. You know that?
All comes from, and he
considered people slavery.
He was inconsistent on that then. He wasn't fully understanding his ideas at that point then.
Oh, that's right. So this is great. I love it. This is Whig history. This is liberalism in its purest form. It's this constant process of moving away from the past, right? The past, which is perceived to be this period of dark superstition.
I'm just talking about applying principles more consistently.
You're saying that he didn't understand it back then. It took right. You had this process of liberalization that had to happen for centuries before, you actually understand what John Locke meant better than he did, right? That's kind of what you're saying here. He didn't really understand his ideas. The fact of the matter is that you don't understand what these people meant. These people, when they're talking about these rights, they're talking about them for white men. It's that simple.
Why is white men the only thing that matters in this case?
You ask them. Ask these people that you're citing as if they're anti-identitarian individualists.
America
They're
was
the ones who
founded
believe
on
it.
America was founded on individualism. This is very explicitly the founding of America. This is very
Okay,
explicitly
and what I addressed that
founding
earlier.
America.
I addressed that earlier. You can have a sense of individualism in the sense that everyone's equal before the law, right? They were breaking away from monarchy in Great Britain. The sense that there isn't kind of this aristocracy that gets special privileges. That's what they were referring to.
You fundamentally
right?
do not believe in individualism. You don't believe in individual rights. You believe that every person is part of this larger tribe that they must generally sacrifice to and be a part of. And
now you're putting words in my mouth.
This is the implication of the principles that you believe.
Yeah, I don't know about that. So I'm fine with things like individual rights. I'm not calling for the return of aristocracy. I'm not calling for, a return to monarchy or something of that sort. So the idea that I don't believe in equality before the law is pretty silly. The idea that all people are equal in ability, right? I think we can probably both agree the founders weren't referring to that. Do you agree with that?
Yeah. Not equal in ability? Cool. Yeah, sure.
Right. Yeah. So it was equality before the law. Equality before the law. Yeah. I don't have an issue with that. I think that's fine.
Equality before the law, but I also believe in individual rights applied completely with
So which individual rights do you think I don't believe in?
Basically all of them. The whole idea, basically life, liberty, and property. The idea that
I don't believe in life. You're saying I don't believe in life.
Yeah, not the idea that an individual can pursue his own life and associate with whomever he wants.
What are you talking about? What have I said to? Be specific.
That you don't want immigrants coming in because of some ideological beliefs they hold. They can't hold different ideological beliefs. Why are ideological beliefs something that needs to be forced by the government?
So, but the founders did believe in individual rights, and yet they excluded people based on race. So
that was an inconsistency.
Right. So
you're simply
I feel like we're
to these
kind of
founders.
going
You're not arguing with my points.
Let me hop in for a second. I feel like we're sort of going in circles here. We've got both of your positions. Since we're on the topic of race as it pertains to the country's founding, what the intent was, I think this is a good segue into our current immigration system and the topic of race realism. Garrett, I know that you discussed a lot about culture earlier. There are some cultural issues that you see going on. So I basically wanted to ask both of you if these ethnic groups around the world have the same, predisposition to voting for individual rights and freedoms. Why can't we just, or can we just share our ideology with their origin countries? I mean, surely under this system, then those countries would become like America. So do you guys think there is a racial element to this, or we can just spread these ideas and it will sort itself out? So Garrett, do you want to give your opinion on that?
I don't see any racial element. If we give people certain ideas, then they will largely accept them. If we give them individualistic ideas and give them capitalism, they will largely accept those ideas. As we see, even in Africa, as they're moving more towards capitalism, their child mortality is falling. They're becoming more prosperous over time, and this is largely indisputable. And I guess even if you look at China too, China has Hong Kong, one of the freest areas in the world, very capitalistic, and that place is basically skyrocketing economically and very high standard of living for the people living in Hong Kong because of that. Well, not necessarily anymore because China's coming in to try to take that away, but that's
well on the topic. Okay, Patrick, what do you have to say for that?
Could you repeat the question just very concisely?
Yeah, sure. So if we're talking about different cultures, is there an element of race involved in that, or can we just transfer these ideologies over and get the same outcome?
Yeah. So I'll say this. Race is one of many factors that plays into culture, right? People are not biologically similar, right? There are group differences. We see that among ethnicities, among races, between men and women. And as part of that, there are going to be cultural differences. The kind of culture created by a people that is on average, say 60, 70, maybe 80 IQ is going to be wildly different from the kind of culture created by a people that is upwards of 100. So And I also believe that certain people's IQ is going to determine whether or not they're going to be able to successfully adopt other value systems as well. And I think that's the case with with liberalism, limited government, democracy, whatever else. I think that's kind of why in many parts of the world you don't really see these systems working out too well. It's not. I'm not a total racial determinist though. But one thing I want to draw attention to is the effect of mass immigration. The IQ element there too. Earlier, I brought up, right, I posed a somewhat hyperbolic question to Garrett as to whether or not letting in tens of millions of idiots into the country every year is a good idea, and it isn't. Garrett, you should look into the work of this guy, Garrett Jones. He wrote a book, I think he's a George Mason economist, something of that sort. He wrote a book called Hive Mind, Why Your Nation's IQ Matters More Than Yours. And basically, the result of his research was that if you bring in tons of people to your country who are of low IQ, it's actually going to make things far worse, and that shouldn't come as a surprise to really anyone. And he found that your ability to succeed as an individual is more determined by the intelligence of people around you than by you as an individual. And it kind of makes sense. If everyone that surrounds you is an idiot, it's going to be harder for you to get by. But look, lowering our average IQ, and there's a dysgenic trend all throughout the Western world whereby the IQ of Western nations is going down slowly, and that's largely, if not solely, a product of mass immigration from low IQ third world countries. It's just not a good idea. And I really just don't see how anyone can look at that lowering of the average IQ in the West and say, it's fine, keep letting these people in. The government can't tell them what to do. I mean, my conception of the government is the government should do what's best for the nation. And if we're letting people in who are not going to be able to assimilate, not going to be able to adopt our ways of life, and are not going to be able to succeed at the same rate that we are, and there are many other reasons to oppose it, then it's just not a good state of affairs.
Well, we need low-skilled labor. That's something that we have a shortage of. And we also should improve the educational system. That would be a big way to raise IQs, essentially, make people smarter.
Are you sure about that?
Not necessarily raise IQs. I think there's some genetic component to that, but I also think that a lot of intelligence is environmental. I don't think it's entirely this biologically determined thing. Like, I don't know if that's what you're claiming, but I know some people in your camp seem to claim that.
Sure. Just for the record, I'm not claiming that. There is a genetic component in intelligence. There's also a genetic component in group differences in intelligence. As to what the split is, it's, scientists are still doing research into that. I like the fact that you're willing to at least acknowledge that there is a genetic component, because it's it's unnecessarily controversial at this point, but I certainly give you credit for doing that.
But one thing, can I add one more
Sure,
thing? I think
yeah.
every single human being has reason and free will, and I think largely if immigrants come to a country, which if we go back to immigration, they're coming to the country to accept the cultural values of the country. They're leaving their country behind, and they're leaving those values behind to come to this country. And if we are really anti-American and anti-Western in this country, and believing in these sort of anti-Western ideas that have been very dominant in society right now, like the very, very anti-reason ideas, then we will see these people not assimilate, which largely has been true as of late. Not necessarily, it hasn't been super negative lately, because they haven't really increased crime at all. There's nothing really that negative. The economic impacts are fine, but
they're not. But
I mean,
we don't have to get back into that. Again, there are issues. So I'm going to bring up just briefly on the economic subject. 50% of STEM workers don't work in the STEM fields. And that's because they can't find work there. And that's largely a result of H-1B immigration. You have these low skill, well, I guess they're technically high skilled, but they're like low level IT workers and computer programmers and whatever else who've been brought in from other countries, particularly India. And they're, the reason employers bring these people in is it's because they're cheaper. They can have these people here dependent upon them for being in the country. So they're not going to ask for raises, because if they, get fired, they get sent back. So it's really, I don't think you're really being honest when it comes to
lowering input costs is a good thing economically, because it lowers prices and it leads to more profits for these businesses, which lets them reinvest and innovate.
Prices of what though? Prices of what?
What? Lower
prices of what?
Goods. Lower prices of goods, because if a company pays less
plastic stuff.
Sure. I don't like.
Right.
What do you?
What about the cost? What about the cost of housing? Has that been lowered?
I mean,
Seems like a pretty important
government's
thing.
been pretty involved in housing lately, so I'd say a lot of the
Right.
problems with housing doesn't have as much to do with immigrants as it has to do with government involvement in the housing market. But that's also a
Maybe.
different topic. So
Sure, sure. Well, yeah, I don't want to get too much back into the economic part of this. So, yeah, Zoomernet, did you have another question you wanted to take us to?
Uh, yeah, sure. So,
Well,
Garrett,
I have
go
something
ahead, Charlie.
really quick. I just wanted to. I'm connecting a couple dots here as I'm listening, and so we just talked about housing prices. We just talked about lower wages equals lower product in Garrett's opinion. And so if I am an American and I'm an American tech worker, how did I get my tech worker position? I went to a 4-year college. I had to pay an exorbitant amount of money in order to get my degree. And I had to do that in order to secure a job in the first place. But now, because of H-1B visas, I can no longer find a job because either A, the jobs don't exist, or if they do exist, they don't pay enough in order for me to cover my costs, so I have to go out into other fields. So would you agree that that would be a issue with our current immigration system?
the issue with this is not immigration, because I want to have as many high skilled people as possible in this country. But I think that the real issue here is the fact that we over incentivize higher education in this country.
Well, you would need a higher education in order to learn the skill set. Would you disagree with
Sure,
that?
I would say that these people should not be going into this field if they see that there's going to be a bunch of immigrants who are going to come and not get those jobs. Go into some field where you're actually going to be able to get a job. I think one big problem societally is
Well,
the
hold
fact
on,
that
hold
there's
on,
two.
hold on
No,
a sec.
can I finish my point though?
No,
Yeah,
because
go
you're
ahead.
confusing me. So, say the first part again,
Shit, what the
just so I
fuck was
can
that?
be
What was
clear.
that? Shit, now I lost my train of thought. What was that? What was I saying?
Well, yeah, maybe
Oh,
not.
okay, the problem with education. I think there's way too many people going into higher education, um, and
But is that applicable to this scenario? Because you
yes,
just said that you
because
would want.
I think a big problem currently is that there's people going into higher education and they're not actually thinking about what jobs are available to them going into this career. So they go into whatever and they come out to find that there's no jobs there for them, and
Yes,
that's
they
their
go into
fault.
STEM and without accounting for the mass immigration of low skilled, entry level
Low
tech
skilled.
workers. I guess technically it's high skilled tech workers, and that's their fault, right? They should have not gone into STEM. It seems like a society that disincentivizes learning, science, technology, engineering, mathematics probably has a few screws loose, right? Probably has a few
Well, I
issues.
mean,
That seems like kind of the thing that you really want to incentivize. So I think
we've
blaming
over
these
incentivized that.
the STEM students for not going well, then what's the issue? What were you referencing when you were talking about people studying things in college, not knowing what jobs are available? That was in the context of
we've over
of STEM
incentivized
workers. So
we've over incentivized people going to college. So if there's the issue with like too many people in high skilled jobs, that is definitely a fault of government in the sense for giving out student loans way too easily, incentivizing college
not
way
for
too
bringing the
much.
immigrants in though. We've got too many Americans doing it. That seems to be what you're saying.
Well, yeah, if someone wants to come in and if an employer wants to pay them less for a similar job, I see no problem with that. Like, look, this is just simply the rights of that employer to do so.
Right. I
Right.
actually,
Well,
if I would jump in for a second, I wanted to ask you, Garrett, is there any difference between uh, immigrant workers and American workers? Do you think employers should have to prioritize Americans, or, if they want to, they should just be able to hire people to come in and compete without any restrictions? What do you think?
I see no reason to stop employers from doing anything essentially, as long as it's not violating anyone's actual like individual rights, negative rights, because it's doing anything else is a violation of the employer's rights to hire whomever they want. And basically they created this business. They are the person who is creating this thing. And they should have
that's
the
just
right
a
to
load
do
of
what they want
nonsense.
with
If
it.
if an employer is doing something that's detrimental to the nation, they absolutely should be punished for
I
that.
disagree with that completely.
Okay, well, we can disagree
that
there.
is that principle that you are stating right now is what will take America into a very, very bad place, because largely historically, the fact that we've let employers do what they want with their business has led to a lot of innovation.
And now they're doing
a lot
things
of-
that have
a lot of
demonstrably
prosperity.
negative effects on the country.
I
Right?
disagree with that. I don't think they're demonstrably
Okay, I mean, do
negative.
you take issue with what Purdue Pharma did? Right?
What do they do?
Purdue Pharma, they manufactured OxyContin. It led to, just this epidemic, right? Opioid overdoses.
They also produce
I don't know
the
enough
drug
about that
in order to get
topic to talk
off
about it.
opiates too.
I don't know enough about that topic to go
Okay.
into.
Well, if I understand your position correctly, just kind of in general, you think that the issue is that our institutions are not promoting individualism. They're not promoting your favorite brand of classical liberalism. And as a result, immigrants who are coming here are not being taught the right thing, right? They're not assimilating to the right values. They're assimilating to progressivism, to what today we consider liberalism, not classical liberalism. Is that kind of an accurate summary of where you stand
they're
on this?
basically incentivized to do that. They're doing what we tell them to do.
Right. Not doing what's naturally in their best interest, and that's, forming political factions as groups and, getting welfare and taking jobs from Americans. That's not the rational thing to do.
I mean,
because it kind of seems like that's just
all that
self-interest,
stuff is-
right?
Taking jobs from Americans is simply not true. I mean, they're not.
That's
coming and taking
absolutely the
jobs-
case. We just
they're not
talked about
coming
it.
in and taking away
You said that
jobs
was
from
an okay
Americans.
thing. When
They're not
talking
taking
about,
away jobs from
absolutely,
Americans.
those STEM kids that graduate college are not getting jobs that they otherwise would have obtained, simply because employers are able to
Sure,
bring
but in
these serf laborers over. It's
general,
absolutely
they're
taking
not
jobs from Americans.
lowering the quantity of American jobs. The
Because
quantity
you
of American
literally have
jobs
a
is still going
situation
up.
where
There's
companies,
maybe
I think
certain
Disney did
situations
this, where they fire their employees, they lay off their employees, and force their employees to train their foreign replacements. So the idea that immigrants aren't taking jobs from Americans is absolutely false. I don't see how you can utter this nonsense. It's just utter nonsense. Do you ever think about the things that you're saying here, man? Come on.
all the benefits that come from this.
All the benefits that come from getting rid of American workers, right?
Because when you have economic progress, you create more jobs largely throughout the rest of the economy. And lower prices. You don't understand economics. Holy shit.
No, I absolutely do understand economics. I'm not an economist, but
You're
neither
thinking
are
so
you.
like short-term and perceptual. You don't see this like the long-term.
No, I'm thinking long-term. I'm
consequences.
thinking about the long-term effects of altering our
thinking- you
demographics.
see,
You're thinking about the
immigrant
short-term
comes in,
lowering
takes
costs.
job.
The prices are going to go down a little bit.
Oh, you see,
It's just a
immigrant
load of
come in,
nonsense.
take job, and then this person's
Yeah,
gone, and then you don't see what happens. You
literally
don't
what's
look at what
happening. You
happens
said it
after
wasn't
that.
happening. You said it wasn't happening. Now you're saying, okay, it's happening,
I'm
but actually it's a good thing for this reason.
No, I'm saying.
So you just
I'm saying
contradicted
that-
something that you said like 10 seconds ago.
I'm
You
saying
have a new
that-
position now that you've
You're
adopted
not
because
letting me- you're not letting me
I'm
have a
grilling you here,
position.
then that's
You're
okay.
not letting me
Go
have
ahead.
a position.
Go ahead, Garrett. Make your position.
So what happens is the immigrant comes in, right, and maybe takes this job, but then what largely happens is they get paid lower wages because immigrants work for lower wages, and then basically which lowers the prices of different goods there and leads to more profits for that employer, which they can invest and save, and all this investment produces more jobs largely, and this is like a better form of creating more jobs because it's investing.
Yeah, and yet kind of the opposite's the case happening now, right? Look at this economic boon.
We don't have
Trump.
capitalism.
We don't have capitalism. Okay. But I mean, what you have here is Trump has kind of done the opposite somewhat. He has restricted the immigration, the immigration flow, basically the number of, he's restricted the labor pool. American wages are going up. Workers of American wages are going up, and you're seeing great economic growth. So I don't think you seem to think that you have to like let in,
What is this great economic growth you're
American
talking about?
jobs being taken by low skilled foreign. I don't think you have to do that. And I
What
think
is
the
this
broader
great economic growth you're
ramifications of
talking
that,
about?
that even if there was some marginal reduction in the price of goods, there are higher civilizational, concerns to be had here. And that's the issue with liberals, right? Particularly Randians. All you guys can think about is
What are these
lowering the
higher
prices a little
civilizational-
bit. You don't have this
Let Patrick
grand
finish.
conception of civilization, right? You're totally fine with the country becoming this third world shopping mall and where everyone, but the cost of goods is a little lower. Come on, what a plebeian conception of civilization. You have no higher aims than just, lowering the price of goods a little.
Economic growth and have people have higher standards of living. That's what all this stuff leads to, having more innovation.
All right. Well, Trump's kind of doing somewhat of that now by doing the
how is he
opposite
doing?
policies that you
Wait,
advocate.
what is this large economic growth you're talking about that Trump has?
I mean, the economy is growing at a reasonably decent rate. It's not
growing
like a
at
huge
very,
deal,
very
but
low at a low rate. Like, isn't it like 2%?
No, I'm pretty
terrible.
sure it's been higher than that. Yeah, I don't know what it is at this point in time.
I don't think that's true. I think it's been like very much stagnant. We have a very stagnant economy at the moment. It's not
I don't think so.
near as much
I don't
as
think
it
so.
should be.
I'd have to double check,
Yeah,
but
look-
no,
you can look it
I
up.
seem
You
to
can look
remember
it up.
reading articles not too long ago about economists who formerly weren't very pro-Trump talking about how, okay, he's doing pretty well. So, but yeah, I mean, look, you're just absolutely wrong about the dynamic that's at play here. You think that let me just ask you this to understand where you are. You've, as we said earlier, I think we were able to, deduce, or you were able to tell us that mass immigration from these countries, you support it in general for the economic reasons that you outlined, but at the same time, that you did admit that there's an issue, that the ideologies being promoted by the academic system, media, whatever else, are not bringing these people toward your purported your favorite brand of liberalism. They're bringing people toward progressivism, identity politics, whatever else. So let me ask you this: you still support mass immigration even while that's happening. You still support mass immigration even though you know that these people are being indoctrinated into the wrong stuff. Why not support an immigration moratorium until we change, what's being promulgated by our institutions, and then let immigrants come in then? Because it seems like you're okay with the flow. You've acknowledged that these people adopting, progressive ideals is a bad thing, but you're not really willing to do what is necessary to stop that. And by the way, if you say, oh, well, we just have to, change our, we just have to change the institutions, that's on us. That's going to take a very long time. And it's a far more complicated process cleaning out the institutional rot than just, limiting immigration or reducing it altogether indefinitely.
I mean, that doesn't really change much. It's still, the West is still going to go in the same direction because of these intellectuals, regardless of if there's immigration or not. I'd rather have these positive economic impacts, which every single credible economist agrees on. And I can find studies, I can read through it.
Every single credible.
Yes. All the credible economists agree that immigration.
Every single globalist neoliberal economist
globalist
So that's
these are also people with lower crime rates than and I'd love to have more peaceful people.
Let's talk about that. So I'm familiar with what you're referring to here. There's a study that said first generation immigrants have a lower crime rate than natives. I don't think you looked into the second generation, because if you did, you would see that there's a second generation spike, of which researchers on the subject are well familiar, that shows that it actually goes higher than the native rate. So their kids are clearly, it's leading to more crime in that regard too. But let's point out, when we're talking about native crime, that isn't white people. That is the sum total of crime in America. Many crimes are disproportionately, or in some cases, overall, committed more by minorities than America. For example, murder, as I'm sure you know, is despite 13% of the population being blacks, 50% of all murders, right? So when we're talking about native crime rates, it's not white people, right? There's a lot of minority crime in there as well. So saying that immigrants coming in are committing slightly less crime, the first generation, than the native population that is largely black crime and Hispanic crime doesn't really mean much to me. Second of all, again, there's a second generation crime spike that goes higher than the native rate. So even if you're just concerned about crime, bringing these people in as soon as they have kids, it's going to be a huge issue. And we know that happens, right? That's something that we can safely predict based on the data.
This is largely due to poverty, and with Hispanics, there's also the question of age too.
So the first generation is.
Can I read some stuff?
Yeah, go ahead, Gary. Go ahead.
All right, so poor Hispanics, 23.5 per 1,000, had lower rates of violence compared to poor whites, 46.4 per 1,000, and poor blacks, 43.4 per 1,000. So Hispanics among poor people had lower rates than white people, and blacks had lower rates than white people as well.
That's where are you getting this from?
What is the site? bgs.gov.
You'd have to send that to me. I don't think that's the case. You're saying that poor white people commit more crime. Is that per capita?
I'm talking about violent crime.
Violent crime, right? Yeah. Is that per capita or is that overall?
It says rate, so it's per capita.
Okay. I don't think that's the case. I think whatever you have there, you're misreading, right?
I'm not,
because you have white people.
I read it verbatim.
You have white people. Sure. You have white people who are roughly 60% of the population who commit roughly 40% of murders, so that that's disproportionately low. Then you have black people that are 13% that commit over 50% of all murders. You're familiar with the statistic, I can see, based on your facial expression. But then you're telling me that somehow in there, and we know that those murders are being committed by poor blacks. The idea that it's just not the case. You just don't see that, right? Look at all the violent parts of the most violent parts of the country are not white parts of the country. I don't see that. I just don't think it's true. I just don't think it's true.
Variable amongst all this, which is poverty.
So you think it's poverty? Well, let me say this: when you're bringing in people from poverty, yeah, you're saying, oh, well, okay, but what about this? You have people who are coming in from presumably fleeing poverty to come to this wonderful capitalistic society. That's the first generation of immigrants, which again, we can pretty much safely predict has a higher crime rate than white Americans.
Lower.
And that's again because the white crime rate is lower than that of Hispanics, that of blacks. Whatever you have there. I mean, I'd be interested to take a look at it, but we have plenty of data that shows that per capita these
immigrants commit less crime. Or second generation?
So it's the first generation that commits slightly less than the native rate. And again, the native rate is inflated by black crime and to some extent Hispanic crime as well. Second generation.
We can look at a comparison between white crime and Latin American foreign-born crime. 0.99% incarceration rates for foreign-born Latin Americans compared to native-born whites, which is 1.71. So the native whites have quite a bit higher actually by doing the math real quick, 0.72%.
It could be true. That's just incarceration rates. That's not everything else. I'd be interested to take a look at that. But again, the second generation spike, you're saying that these people in the second generation are more impoverished than the people who came here fleeing, from Central America or something. I don't buy that. If it's poverty, then why is the second generation so much higher?
I mean, they're generally poorer still. They're generally still poor.
They're poorer? Yeah. They come to America and they're poorer? No. These people are like walking barefoot for across half a continent. They're coming up here and somehow they're poorer once they arrive in San Diego. I don't think that's the case.
So Garrett, just to jump in for a second, Garrett,
sure.
Since we're talking about the issue of poverty, just to tie in one of the economic points from before, I just wanted your opinion. If these people are poorer, do you or do you not think it would be beneficial to, adjust our economic policy to raise low-skilled wages?
I'm more concerned with.
That's a good one.
We have a shortage of jobs here. We have a shortage of low-skilled jobs, so we need more immigrants to come in to fill those jobs. There are a lot of employers who need more.
Got to bring in the people to live in poverty, and then they'll commit a bunch of crimes, and then we can blame poverty for it. And sounds like a pretty good model for society.
Well, for each of you guys, do you think? Just let me follow up on that real quick. For each of you guys, I know there's a debate over the shortage. Do you believe that there is a shortage of actual workers, or do you believe that the wages simply need to be raised to attract qualified employees? Patrick, what do you think of that?
I think that's the case somewhat. It would probably depend on the field. It would depend on the field, right? Is there a huge overall, there might be somewhat of a shortage of workers. But again, yeah, you're right. It's somewhat ambiguous. What qualifies as a shortage, right? The fact that native wages are going up is not a bad thing. And so if any sign of that process happening, any sign of native wages going up, employers, having to pay their employees a decent wage, if that's not a bad thing. Some people who are opposed to that, who are more neoliberal in their economics, would maybe characterize that as a wage shortage for obvious reasons, because they want to change that, and they don't want that wage rising process to happen. But Garrett?
I mean, there is very much a large shortage with regards to a lot of low-skilled industries. I already mentioned that the construction industry has the highest share of owners reporting hiring difficulties at 68%, manufacturing second at 59%. These are jobs that are not being filled by Americans. These are jobs that immigrants are coming in and filling. And it's not as if that, well, they're going to raise wages in these industries. Construction actually has fairly high wages, from my understanding of the field. Because
right, it's
there's
been
such
rising
a shortage.
Around 4.5%.
Yeah,
go ahead.
So these are industries that have a decently high wages, and I don't like it. Doesn't just let immigrants in and fill those jobs, because we need more laborers in those fields.
Right, but again, you said the issue was poverty, but then you said you're totally fine with these people coming in for the express purpose of living in poverty and being impoverished, low-paid workers. Doesn't that seem a little odd, right? Why is that? Why is that a good idea?
I'm fine with them coming in if that is what is going to improve their standard of living. That's what
But
they
you
choose
just
to
said
do.
that it doesn't. You just said that it doesn't. You
I
said that
never
they're
said
actually
it
more
doesn't.
impoverished when they get
They're
here.
living in way more poverty than before. But like before.
Okay, so then that
before
doesn't
in the
improve their
country.
standard of living then.
No, it does improve their standard of living. In those other countries, they're living in more poverty than here. Why else?
Okay, but that's still the opposite of what you said, right? Because remember you
I
said
might have had a misstatement, but what did I say?
okay. So I mean, when you're blaming, crime on poverty, and we talked about the first generation that has slightly lower than average rate for immigrants, then you have the second generation where there's the big spike. You blamed poverty. You said they're still here. They're still, they're in worse poverty here. I guess you understand now that that's not, totally
No,
accurate representation of.
they're more impoverished here, but they come to this country because the poverty here with our economic advancement is better than where they were at in that country. Why else would they
So
come?
far you've said that they were more impoverished there, and they're also more impoverished here. You've said that. Everyone heard you say it. So which is it? Where's the worst poverty?
In those other countries, but they're getting better, but they're still in poverty relative to us here.
Relative to us, sure, but relative to where they were before, it's still better. Nonetheless,
better,
the crime
yes.
rate is still higher.
Higher than Americans. You're comparing. You're
Higher than the
point you're
first
trying to
generation.
make.
We're talking first generation where they're coming from, as you said, extreme poverty, to the second generation where the crime rate spikes again. And you're saying,
They're still in poverty.
are they okay? But are they better or worse than they were before?
I'm not sure. That's whatever happens to those
Are you
immigrants.
sure?
I'm talking about first generation immigrants coming in. They come in from these countries where they have where they're more impoverished, and then when these first generation immigrants come to America, they are in a better situation, but often still in poverty. And even in that case, they still have lower crime rates.
Yeah, well, if it's just a function of poverty and they're in a better situation and they're committing more crimes than the people from,
They're committing more crimes than the people in in Mexico.
No, so the first and second generation comparison has to do with America.
That's not what
that
I'm
has to
talking
do with
about,
America.
Yeah, that's not.
And that is what we're talking
I don't
about.
know, but
I don't.
I'm
grilling you on here.
Look, I don't know a first generation immigrants and second generation. I don't know who is more wealthy than the other. That's not something I'm saying. I'm saying those second generation immigrants are more in poverty, or not more in poverty. They're in poverty.
Okay, they're in poverty. All right. Well, are you?
So I feel like we've kind of talked about a lot of the. Go ahead, Patrick.
No, that's fine. We can move along here. I think.
Okay, yeah, I feel like we've kind of gone in circles with a lot of the economic arguments.
Sure.
I just had a couple more questions on your guys' thoughts on some of the cultural and political issues. We talked about demographics a little bit, but I was just wondering what your guys' thoughts are on white people becoming a minority. As we know, this is projected sometime in the next 20 or 30 years. So what changes will this have on white people and the country as a whole? Garrett, do you want to give your thoughts on that, if any?
Yeah, so I don't think that a certain ideology is intrinsic to a certain people. I think anybody can hold a certain ideology and can get the positive outcomes from that ideology. And I think basically, so for that reason, preserving a racial majority is basically meaningless.
Basically meaningless. Okay. How do you think it is for white kids that are growing up in, maybe 5, 10, 15% white schools where they're surrounded by Hispanics and blacks who live in ethnic conclaves, who have a strong sense of identity, people living in poverty, as you pointed out? Do you think those white kids are going to be better or worse off, growing up in an environment like that or in a more homogeneous school system? Do you think they're going to be picked on?
I grew up in a very diverse schooling system, and there were no real problems there. And I think a large part of that was actually because we brought a lot of the diversity there was from this I don't know how to explain them, like this organization called like Lutheran Social Service that would bring people in from African countries, basically immigrants in from those countries, and brought them here, and they were basically plopped right into my neighborhood, and all of my experiences with them have been largely positive. It was largely what the Martin Luther King dream of, like, I had a dream that all white people and black people would like get along. And I'm
tearing up.
Course,
that's just really beautiful.
Yeah, no, it was very beautiful.
Awesome. That's great. Well, Yeah, I'll say this again. You have many different angles to consider here as to why this demographic shift is going to make America worse off and us worse off as a result. You are, and we are part of a group, like it or not, that is being increasingly treated as a group, right? You have people competing against you from an ethnic, racial, and sometimes religious angle. And you're basically who's going to win really when you have different groups competing against each other, and then you have a sea of individuals who have no conception of themselves. The individuals are going to get crushed every time, and that's what's happening. You're seeing more tribalism. We're seeing lower levels of trust. By the way, this is a good time to bring up Robert Putnam. Have you looked at his research at all?
I don't know who that is, but
Okay,
hold up.
no,
Go ahead,
no.
Gary. Go ahead.
Okay. I just
I
asked him if he knew who this guy was. I want to talk about Robert Putnam. So Robert Putnam, he wrote this book, Bowling Alone. It looks at the decline in social capital and community in America. Then he did a subsequent study called E Pluribus Unum. And in that study, he examined the effects of diversity on a number of different metrics, levels of trust, social capital, social cohesion. By the way, social capital refers to networks of people, voluntary reciprocity, as he terms it. And, he basically every metric that he measured suffered as a result of ethnic diversity. And when you consult the literature overall on diversity, it shows that it is not a social benefit, right? There's actually very limited benefit. And then a few studies that point out to there being benefits of ethnic diversity, it's like, oh, well, people trust each other less, so that makes you better at like this really specific job, makes you be like a better day trader, or, you're going to be so isolated that you're not going to, talk to your, neighbor in the office, and you're going to be a better office drone. But overall, it is not a good thing for society. And there are plenty of historical examples of diversity going awry, right? You have the breakup of Yugoslavia, where you had people that were very similar ethnically, racially and religiously. Actually, no, that's not the case. Racially, yes, but there were ethnic and religious differences. Many other examples of ethnic conflict. And I think if you look at the world overall, most conflict at this point is ethnic, religious, and racial. So, the evidence, the historical and sociological evidence points to America trending toward lower levels of trust, less community, and less social cohesion. And a society to be successful needs to be cohesive, right?
Is that something that needs to be governmentally enforced, though? Can you give me a justification for basically entering force into that realm to prevent certain business owners from hiring different immigrants who want to come in, or letting immigrants come in if they want to?
Can government force to prevent immigrants from coming in? Yes, absolutely. America has always chosen to exclude certain people from the country. And again, by the way, when the country was founded, it was everyone who wasn't white. So that's if you believe that the government has no ability to say who can come in and who can't come in, then it is you who is anti-American, right? It is you that the founding fathers would be scoffing at right now. Do you accept that much at the very least?
No, because the founding fathers founded this country largely on individual rights and individual values.
And yet they excluded people who weren't, again, so they founded the country on these kind of ambiguous ideas. And when we look at what they actually believed, right, we're doing this whole thing over again. Turns out that they actually believe something different than what you're saying that they believed in. You're projecting your conception of individual rights and liberalism, blah, 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 onto them. You're saying, well, they actually, they didn't know, they weren't right back then. They had some inconsistencies. It took America a while to get to, the current understanding of what they actually meant. The founders better than they do, right?
The founders were perfect, but I'm looking at the large trends, the large reason why
they're smarter than you. And a lot of these policies that they put into place that you're saying were imperfections, actually America would have never succeeded had they not put these things into place. Had America opened the floodgates to the third world, we would not be living in the country that we have right now. It's just absolutely not the case, right? So it's just a fact of the matter. Diversity is a bad model for society, and it's only going to get worse. And by the way, mass immigration is going to continue to give the left power. It is going to continue to give progressives power. If you dislike progressivism, then you have to oppose mass immigration. But you're not willing to do that. You're not willing to do that because you have this utterly ridiculous libertarian, conception of the state where the government has no right to say who can and can't. Yeah, it does. The state absolutely has the right to say who can and can't come in, and what the state should be doing right now is preventing basically anyone from coming in until we can sort out what's going on in this country.
So would you be in favor of basically letting immigrants in and not granting them citizenship for the first generation immigrants because they wouldn't be able to vote? They wouldn't be able to get on welfare. Why would you be opposed to such a system?
Because there are many other reasons that we've been discussing tonight to oppose mass immigration, like the lower levels of trust. Remember that? We discussed that 2 minutes ago. Robert Putnam stuff.
Why should the government enforce that if an immigrant wants to come in?
Why should the government? Why should the government care about how much people trust each other in society? Right? Because you just have, again, you have this idea of society. Right. You have a very specific autistic idea of individual rights that the founders and most classical liberals who basically gave you these ideas wouldn't agree with. The government absolutely has the right to ban people from entering the country, and the government should ban people from entering the country who are going to make the country worse off. And I certainly would argue that lower levels of trust, lower levels of social capital, that qualifies as being as being worse off for the country. Maybe you disagree. Maybe a society where everyone's atomized and no one trusts each other. But look, you can get this. You can get this. You can get a pillowcase. You can get a table for 10 cents less. So there you go. Right.
I mean, you're not looking at the fundamentals of what these people advocated and what the country.
I am looking at the fundamentals. I'm talking about what they actually did, how these ideas manifested in the real world. You're just trying to take these little things and say, oh, well, they actually meant this, and you're just ignoring how they actually implemented these things.
If I could hop in and diffuse for a second and kind of just get a clear answer from Garrett. Garrett, what role, if any, do you think the government should play in maintaining quality of life or looking after the quality of life of its citizens? Patrick brought up the lower levels of trust in society. What role should government play in, trying to remedy that or trying to maintain a cohesive society, if any at all?
It depends what you mean by that. If there's a individual right being limited, then I would say there's no reason. Or hold up. If there's an individual right being violated, then the government should get involved. But if no one's individual rights to think, to have property, to live their own life, to think for themselves, if none of these are being violated, there's no reason for the government to step in.
So you would prioritize individualism over everything else, basically, over the collective society.
Yeah.
If I'm just getting your point.
Yeah, we have no duty to sacrifice for the collective.
No duty to improve the country, right? Who cares about the country, right? That is liberalism at its worst, and perhaps at its purest, right? Everything else disappears but the individual. Well, guess what? You know why that's stupid? Because at the end of the day, societies are comprised of groups. They're not comprised of individuals, right? No individual exists in isolation. Every person has a tribe, has a family, has a community. So just totally unautistically focusing on the individual and excluding everything else is part of the reason why we're in this mess to begin with, is why Western civilization's dying. Western civilization, contrary to what you said, is not dying because Nick Fuentes is making jokes about communism. It's absolutely because we lost a sense of self, right? And now other people are coming in who absolutely have a sense of self, and they're carving up what basically our ancestors created.
And our sense of self should be what made this country great, which is individual rights, which is capitalism. Those are the things that made this country great. It's the idea that that's the whole reason.
No, you just you're totally historically illiterate when it comes to America and what America has been, because you didn't understand. You were unfamiliar with our first Naturalization Act, right? You're unfamiliar with the 1965 Immigration Act.
With these specifics. I'm
concerned. You want to talk about American identity, what
trends.
America has been. We can talk about that. America, at its founding, had a creedal component. It had a religious component, right? You're tipping your fedora. I can see that.
Thomas Jefferson was a deist. Benjamin Franklin wasn't a big fan of religion either.
You had some that were deists, right? But if you looked at America overall, what do you think the dominant form of religion was? It's always been a very pious country.
Yeah, I mean, it was probably Christianity.
Protestant, right? So there you go. Creedal, religious, cultural, ethnic, and racial. And over time, we've seen a process of erosion whereby some of those those aspects of identity, those facets, have disappeared, and that is making us worse off. And again, what you do is you're only aware of the creedal component, right? It's not even that you just only value the creedal component. I think you're only aware that the creedal component really exists. You're uneducated on the other aspects of American identity, and you're just trying to say, no, America is only really the creedal, maybe some of the cultural stuff, but that's not the case, right? America has always been conscious of race, of identity, of religion, demographics, all of these things.
Those things are not important whatsoever.
They are important. They are important. If America had opened the floodgates to the third world, we would not have the country. It wouldn't have turned out because the ideals that you are, again, autistically focusing on are the unique product of a particular people's historical experience. We went through the Enlightenment. We went through everything that led up to the Enlightenment, not anyone else, right? Where are all these other classical liberal societies all around the world? Liberalism, first came about in the late 17th century. Where are all of these non-white liberal societies? Where are the non-white objectivist societies? Where are they? Show them to me.
You have Hong Kong as one place that was pretty free for a while and was pretty prosperous.
You know why Hong Kong was like that, right?
Yeah, because Britain instituted capitalism when they came there.
Right, because it was imposed upon them.
Capitalism,
yeah. Thank you. All right. Well, I mean, we've covered a lot of ground. I'm going to keep going, but we did agree to an hour and a half. So if we want to
keep going great. This has been great. I think what we'll do now is each of you can give a closing statement for a minute or two. I want to thank everyone for tuning in. This has been a great time. Thank you guys both for coming on. I think we've gotten everyone's position clear, and the viewers can decide. Garrett, do you want to start with your closing statement?
Sure. I think that largely the West is great because of individualism, because of capitalism, and the rights of individuals to choose who they want to associate with. That's one of the rights. And if an immigrant wants to do that, I mean, that's his every right to do so, because immigrants will boost the economy, which is a good thing, which, I mean, he had some points in there that were fairly irrelevant, because, I mean, I actually want to read this little part right here. The impact of immigration on native-born workers is very small. There's little evidence that it affects overall employment levels. There are some positive wage effects for some groups of native workers. Immigration has a positive impact on long-run economic
all those STEM
growth.
workers who went to college and slaved away
I'm talking about overall.
and can't find jobs in their field.
You're giving me very specific.
Go on.
You're giving me very specific things, but I'm talking about larger societal trends important. And what the statistics
go ahead and
show.
finish your statement. Go ahead, Garrett.
Also, immigrants are less likely to be criminals, and I don't think that the country should concern itself. The government should concern itself with forcing ideologies on people. So yeah, that's my main thesis.
All right. Well, I've refuted a number of those talking points, particularly the one about immigrants and crime rates. The second generation spikes well above native. Hispanics and blacks commit crimes at far higher rates than white people do. That's not even controversial. When it comes to immigration, though, it's about far more than economics. Garrett seems to believe that the ultimate good that needs to be maximized at any cost, well, there are a few of them. One is individual rights. One is the government not telling people to really do much of anything. The second is lowering costs, right? In raising the cost of living. If you care about the cost of living, the quality of life. If you care about the quality of life, then you have to take into account many other things, right? If you actually do care about the well-being of people, and you're not so heartless that you don't care about that, because you did cite that, you only conceive of it in very capitalistic, libertarian terms. But I would argue that if I care about the quality of life for Americans as well, I don't care about the quality of life for people outside of this country. Governments historically have virtually all chosen who can come in and who can't come in. This is what the founding fathers had in mind. This is what virtually all Americans up until very recently believed. Even now, most Americans do favor more of an immigration process than what Garrett outlined, but that's okay. Mass immigration is absolutely destroying this country. It is bringing in people who have higher crime rates. It is bringing in people who are displacing American workers, in some cases literally being forced to, American workers are being forced to train their replacements. It is depressing wages. Again, what the dynamic I outlined with STEM workers, you can look at many different fields and look at the effects of that. Additionally, we are lowering our national IQ. As Garrett Jones' research shows, that is not a good thing. Contrary to what Garrett postulated, education actually doesn't do much when it comes to raising IQ. The environmental factors that really matter are things like access to water and like very, very basic nutrition that basically everyone here in America has. Other than that, tribalism is an integral part of human existence. And at this point, it's only white people who are not being tribal, although that could change. And I think it is changing to some extent. So we're basically opening up our country, come one, come all, come up, and carve away our birthright, take, a piece of the pie that our ancestors created for yourself. We're bringing people in who are being indoctrinated into radical anti-white progressive ideology. And Garrett doesn't seem to, he does, I think he's intelligent enough to understand that there's somewhat of an issue there, but he's not willing to do what it takes to end that process. And that is cutting down the flow of immigration and then focusing on repairing our institutions. But I'll say this: I appreciate Garrett's willingness to debate. He made a few points in there that I agree with. I do favor good faith debate, and I hope everyone watching this got something out of it.
Yeah, nice talking with you, man. Interesting to hear your perspective on some things.
Yeah, definitely.
Didn't agree on
Excellent.
Awesome. Well, thanks both of you guys for coming on. Thanks everyone for tuning in. I'm going to open the chest right now, and we will see you tomorrow with a regular episode of Gripecast. But
by the way, I will be streaming now, so don't go too far. Open up my DLive channel. I'll be there.
Yes, we'll host you.
Awesome.
Everyone tune into Patrick's stream. But for us, have a good rest of your evening.
All right. Thank you guys for having me on.
You're welcome.
Oh, holy shit. Let me open up my fucking camera. Let's get myself into this frame. Oh shit, I'm on the Patrick Casey side now. Oh shit. Here, let's get me in this frame. Alright, that should be good enough. So yeah, he did not stop fucking talking. Holy shit, I could barely get a fucking point in there. Oh man, yeah, a lot of that was somewhat of a shit show. It's alright. It's nice to talk with people like that. I think I definitely have a lot to improve on. One thing that that pissed me off was the moderators jumping in and basically giving studies to support him. They're obviously going to agree with him. They're going to bring those sort of studies on. Just you don't need to bring those on. There were a lot of claims that he made that were simply untrue. There's a lot of focuses that he had that were completely wrong. I don't think he has a good conception of what makes the West great, what made the West what it is, what made the West great, essentially. I don't think he understands that, and we all know that that's capitalism. Maybe we can chalk. I think I had a somewhat bad performance. It's because I let him talk way too fucking much. Here, let me show you what I fucking wrote. This early on. Don't let him interrupt. Fuck. He interrupted way too fucking much. I let him talk way too much. I barely got a fucking point in that whole debate. He was just throwing a bunch of information at me all at one time, and I never really had the time to take and address each of these points one by one. This is one thing that I need to get better at. I need to focus more on this sort of shit. Holy crap. Because he gish-galloped the fuck out of me, took the conversation exactly where he wanted it to go. That's something I need to improve on. But that is why I debate. That I need to improve on those sort of things. Let me just I have a bunch of statistics actually that I used a lot in this debate. This was one thing that I looked at quite a bit. This was the thing that I read at the end regarding economics. This was the labor shortage article. If you guys can see that. There was a bunch of other stuff I wanted to talk about too. Entrepreneurship rate of refugees compared with... I should have fucking used this argument. Holy shit. Oh my god. Yeah, because these immigrants are not coming in and being less intelligent. They're creating more businesses than U.S.-born workers. What's another thing? Fiscal analysis. Immigrants produce 1.58 billion in state revenues, which exceeded the 1.16 billion in state services they received. This was undocumented immigrants in Texas. So the fiscal impact is negligible. This one. Studies of effective immigration on homicide in U.S. cities have reported mostly null or negative results. These studies suffer from a failure to weight by population size or a lack of... estimates are insignificant, but none suggest a substantial negative effect of immigration on a homicide. This finding is replicated with 1990 data. Model comparisons indicate that conventional specifications exaggerate the benefit of immigration somewhat. However, this says that there's probably not negative results, but they're largely null. That was the main argument of that. This was the other thing that I was citing. this BJS.gov. I don't know what this is. Bureau of, I don't know what that is. But poor Hispanics, 25.3 per 1,000 had lower rates of violence compared with poor whites, 46.4 per 1,000, and poor blacks, 43.4 per 1,000. Poor urban blacks have had rates of violence similar to poor urban whites. This is a lower number than for the white people. All of his arguments about like it being intrinsic to race are completely debunked by every stat that I've ever seen in my life. Let's look at another thing. Between 1990 and 2013, the foreign-born share of U.S. population grew from 7.9% to 13.1%, and the number of unauthorized immigrants more than tripled from 3.5 million to 12.2 million. During the same period, FBI data indicates that the violent crime rate declined 28%. Or 48%, sorry, including falling rates of aggravated assault, robbery, rape, or murder. All this sort of shit. I didn't have time to say any of the shit because he kept fucking talking. He would not let me get into a point. There, you can see here in the video that I was trying to get in a bunch of fucking points, but he would just keep going. I was trying to argue with a point that he was making, but he'd just keep on going. He would not fucking stop to let me respond to him point by point. He just kept gish galloping the fuck out of me with his points. Where am I looking for? Yeah, all of this stuff is about immigrants, but he largely agreed with this. Here's the point. Foreign-born Latin Americans, 0.99% incarceration rate. White non-Hispanics, 1.71%. Or U.S.-born white non-Hispanics, 1.71%. Yeah, this is, like, obviously, there's going to be no effect of... Yeah, there's no effect of race... there's no effect of... there's no effect of immigration on crime, or crime is lower among immigrants. That is definitely the case. What else? Let's get some more stuff. Incarceration rates by immigration status. Natives, 1.53%. Illegal immigrants, 0.85%. Legal immigrants, 0.47%. All of this is so obviously true. Yeah, this is like... I wish I could have gotten more in. And then let's look at incarceration rates among whites and Hispanics. Hispanics have slightly higher, but they're also a lot poorer. This has nothing to do with poverty. This is simply young Hispanics. So when you take into account age, which is an important thing to take into account here, you see all of this stuff. You see that Hispanics have only a slightly higher incarceration rate than white people. In the Northeast, I guess it's different, but excluding the Northeast, I don't know what's going on with the Northeast. All this, yeah, this sort of stuff is. Let me see if I can find anything else. Yeah, so there's obviously a spike with black people among age because there's a lot more poverty with black people and a lot more people living in cities. But also a big point that I wanted to make, but I didn't really have time to get my point across, was the whole idea of the war on drugs, of how it more affects people in poverty than people not in poverty, and how drugs are simply not something that we should be criminalizing because you're not hurting anybody by consuming drugs. But yeah, let's move this back over here. Oh shit. Yeah, let's move this over here. Okay, so now I'm back on the screen. I also had a bunch of notes written down. I had my opening position. I had all this shit, but I could never really get to it because I couldn't make a point for long enough. I was kind of confined to sound bites, and I kind of got overwhelmed a little bit because I felt like I had to get my point out as quickly as possible before he stops and interrupts me. Yeah, I mean, I had some points about religion and some of his claims about what the West is. Religion destroys a human by claiming he is weak, and this leads to authoritarianism, because if a human can't think for himself, you need a government to step in. Altruism also fucking sucks. There's no reason why I should have to sacrifice myself for a collective. Why I should have to sacrifice my happiness for a collective. My happiness is primary. You, the group, have no claim over me. That's one thing I wish we could have gotten into more. But I didn't have time to make very much points. He was just lecturing at me. He was constantly fucking lecturing at me. This is what these groypers try to do. I watched that debate with Nick Fuentes in Destiny, and he did the same fucking thing. Western greatness comes from reason. That's one point that is very important. Every human being has the ability to reason. Every human being has the ability to have a rational mind, including Hispanics, including black people, including immigrants. All these people can think for themselves. And if you look at which group of people is starting the most businesses, it's the fucking immigrants, dog. It's the immigrants. These people are coming and becoming part of American individualistic culture. And I think a lot of the problem is within the country, with regards to us not telling them to assimilate. What else? Industrial Revolution versus the Dark Ages. So when we accepted Christianity, when we accepted altruism, we fell into the Dark Age. The Industrial Revolution came as a result of accepting reason and individualism. Also, God isn't fucking real. That's an important point. Oh, fedora tip. What a fucking retarded argument. He never really argued with that point. He just said, oh, you're tipping your fedora. Blacks, poverty, Hispanic, all that stuff I kind of addressed. And the reason why blacks are poor, which I couldn't really get into and I didn't really want to get into it, is for a large part because of the problems regarding slavery and a lot of the things that have happened since then. Like there's the fact that you only recently have abolished Jim Crow, which a lot of people were alive for, that are still alive today, who were alive during the times before the 1964 Civil Rights Act, which I have some issues with. But I do think that the getting rid of a lot of government involvement in these sort of things or getting rid of government discrimination, government enforced discrimination, is definitely a good thing in general. But right after that, we decided to institute these sort of war on poverty programs that basically hold people down in poverty by incentivizing poverty, essentially. And if somebody is poor in the country right now, it's really hard for them to be socially mobile. That's something else I could have mentioned when we were talking about the second generation versus first generation. Assimilation, this is a big point. He never really argued against this. Immigrants do what we tell them. He never argued against this point. They do exactly what we tell them to do. They don't like hold on to their cultures. They do exactly what we tell them to do. And when we tell them to keep their own culture, to be multiculturalists, they do that. Let's see. Yeah, and free will and reason are two faculties that all humans have, even immigrants. Another thing he was fucking trying to do constantly was point to all these specific things and ask me, oh, do you know what this is? Do you know what this specific thing is? No, I don't fucking know what those things are. I'm looking at the principles of the issue. I don't care what random racist beliefs some of the founding fathers might have had. I don't really care. That's not something I'm interested in. I'm not interested in talking to you about the beliefs of the founding fathers that were racist. I believe that the founding fathers founded this country on individualism. That should be an incontroversial claim. They founded this country on individual rights. The Declaration of Independence says men are created equal and given life, liberty, and property, individual rights. All these things are very good things, and they are what made America this great, prosperous country. Because in the Industrial Revolution, we took those ideas to their logical extreme by giving people freedom and letting them think for themselves and letting them produce for themselves. And we see the results of that. You have these great big companies like Rockefeller's company, Standard Oil, that led to a lot of prosperity in the country by by basically powering society through finding this new source of energy. All these people are so fucking important. These are the atlases that carry society, and these people are advocating against this. They're advocating against the idea that a human being can use reason to pursue his own life and should use reason to pursue his own life. Voting. Are there any actual changes that are going on because of immigration? He never really could argue that. He never really made a good point regarding that. He said, it's indisputable that this is happening. There's no real changes with regards to voting. Also, the fact that they're going to vote blue is I don't find Republicans that much more desirable than Democrats. Republicans want to control you in the bedroom, and Dems want to control you economically, and both of these are bad. Both of these are not good ideologies. I completely disavow the current political spectrum. Should the government be involved in ideology? That is something that he never really had an argument for either. He never really explained why should we care? Why should the government care about ideology? Now, I have a point on this. Happiness cannot be forced. With regards to ideology, if you have this idea that the government should force certain people to believe certain things, you can't force certain beliefs on people. You cannot force happiness. You need to let people make their own decisions for themselves. That is the only way that they will be happy in their life. Immigrants are more socially conservative and will preserve family. This is very true. Immigrants are very socially conservative and will do exactly what these nationalists want. Will have these sort of socially conservative values that these nationalists want. Last card. Preserving the racial majority is meaningless. Man is great because of his rational faculty, which every single human being has, regardless of race. America is great because rights are protected. This is a difference between us and Africa, Asia, etc. If people accept individual rights and accept the idea that a human being can use reason for his own life, they become prosperous. This is always the case throughout history. Hong Kong, Islam, I don't know what the fuck he was talking about, but the large majority of the Islamic country was not this weird minority group that he was talking about that came up with everything. Why were those people allowed to have a society where they did that sort of thing? But once again, I didn't get a chance to respond to any of these points because he just would say a point and just move on in his speech, and I can't respond to every fucking thing that he says at once because I forget half the shit he says. He was controlling the conversation. That was my bad for letting him do that. I need to allow myself to get better at debating, and that's why I do these sort of things. I need to get better at debating. I need to get better at controlling the conversation. Yeah, don't let him interrupt. Don't let him interrupt me. Don't let him interrupt. Also, one last thing. When I came into this debate, I said, let's try to refrain from the ad hominems. Let's try to refrain from those. And also, let's refrain from moderators jumping in. How many fucking times is the moderator going to jump in and pull some fucking statistics out to defend Patrick? How many fucking times was he going to do that? If he didn't bring any statistics, that's on him. But you can't have moderators going behind the back of the participants and looking up statistics for one of the contestants in the debate. That is an unethical form of debating. Also, he's fucking calling me autistic half the fucking time in the debate. I mean, that's just, oh man. I get what they're doing with that word, but it's just very much an ad hom sort of attack. He was very good at the ad homs. I was just trying to stay calm, let my points be heard, try to get my points across, and I don't know. I did that to an extent. I think the points that I did have when I was allowed to speak, pretty much, I got my point across most of the time. I think there will be a lot of people who say I lost this debate. I think that's going to be the majority consensus, especially among the Groypers, because I didn't really get to speak as much as I would have liked to. But yeah, I think I could have done a lot better in this debate, and I think going forward, I need to be a little more assertive and trying to control the conversation, which is not something I did very well in this specific conversation. But it's all good, though. Regardless of what happens, I appeared on the stream, got some debating experience, and should do better next time if this ever happens again. So yeah. His arguments of what Western civilization is so incoherent and so weak. Oh, because white people are what? Why is that? Why does that fucking matter? I still don't see why the skin color has any effect on anything. They can show these sort of correlations, but that's because white people are largely living in free societies. Also, he was constantly accusing me of defending this fucking status quo that we have today. I'm not a big fan of the status quo. I think people are way too short term. I think we're not in a capitalist society, which is a point that I got across there. I said what we have today is not capitalism, and I kind of left it at that. Oh my god. These people have such a weird conception of what capitalism is. I'm gonna take out my headphones. These people have such a weird conception of what capitalism is, and if they think what we have today is is the result of capitalism, they are woefully mistaken. If you look at historical trends, the more the government we see as time goes on, the government has gotten more and more involved, especially economically. Not necessarily as much as in people's individual personal lives, which is good. But the government is so fucking involved economically. We literally have a fucking central bank. How are you going to call this capitalism? What we have right now is not capitalism. It's this mixed economy bullshit. And I think a lot of objectivists are going to be mad at me after this debate because I didn't assert myself as much as I fucking should have. But it's all good. I had this debate. It was an experience, and yeah, that is that. Oh, I'm doing this again. I just need to open OBS over it. Yeah, is there anything else I want to say about this debate? Yeah, this was man. I think people will appreciate the fact that I went on and debated. Yeah, but I think a big issue is this dude was so concrete bound. He was so bound to these sort of concrete ideas, and it was not good. He was like constantly asking me these questions like, do you know what this thing is? Do you know what this thing is? And I don't really care. Those are not things I'm interested in. I like to look at philosophical trends throughout history. I don't care about these specific things. And he was basically trying to make this argument that the founders were identitarians, just like him. And that just seems like such an absurd claim because, well, maybe they were. Maybe they had some racist beliefs. But that's not the principles this country was founded on. I was trying to make that point, and I hope that got across. People are largely going to say I lost that debate. People are going to probably shit on me, say, oh, Patrick Casey fucking raped this dude. The issue is he talked way more than me. Yeah, I really did not have time to make this a good, fruitful discussion. If I ever stopped, he would just go on another rant and just add more and more points to the list. But yeah, I need to just have quick comebacks. I need to have quick ways to just get into a talking point. There were a lot of times where I wanted to make a point because he made this point and then he just moved on from it in the middle of his speech. And there were times where I started trying to talk and he just kept talking. He went on these long-ass rants that were really annoying to deal with. And, yeah. I mean, God, this was a shitty debate. Yeah. It was alright, though. I think I did alright. I do. I think I did. With what was given to me, I went on a Groyper podcast to debate a high-level Groyper. So if anything, at least look at my courage. That's something that's big. I'm someone who looked up immigration statistics for like a week. Thought about this issue for like a week. Basically wrote down my points an hour before the debate. Wrote down the major things that I wanted to talk about an hour before the debate. And I'm a 19-year-old person who just created a YouTube channel. Someone who grew up as a very socially awkward kid, but whatever, all of this is irrelevant. The point of this channel is to improve myself and improve my speaking. And I think I did that to an extent. Because this was I don't know, it was alright. People are going to let's see what the Discord has to say about that debate.